Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast. I am your host, Matt Infante, joined as always by Adam H. Beasley. And today we have a very special guest joining us. It is PFN's Chief Content Officer, David Bearman. David, welcome to the show.
Yeah, David! All right, David!
Thanks for having me back on. I'd like to state the fact that last time you had me on, the Dolphins wound up scoring 70 points. So, I mean, right now it's one appearance, 70 points. That's the barometer.
Infante, at some point, we're going to be able to explain to our CCO the difference between causation and correlation.
Beasley bingo, number one.
Yep, exactly. Who had that on their bingo card there? Yep. Adam with that line.
Yep.
For those of you that don't know, we get that line frequently. I think he said it last week on the podcast as well. So
He did. Beasley
I'm going to keep saying it until you guys understand what it means. That's really what it comes down to.
But the funny thing is that 70-point comment David made, not out of the realm of possibility, considering their opponent next week. We'll get to that in a second. But Adam, I haven't spoken with you really on the record here since I guess the Dolphins were 3-0 at the time, right? So how do you view this first half, how it's unfolded compared to what you expected heading in? Myself and Adam have talked about this, ad nauseum every week, especially last week. But where do you fall on kind of expectations right now?
Well, I mean, if you had told me back in August the Dolphins would be 6-3 entering their bye week, I would have signed up for it, absolutely. You guys had talked about it on the pod last week, resetting expectations, and you didn't know Denver was going to be as bad as they were then, and obviously improved after their win on Monday night. You thought the Chargers would be a little better. Nobody saw the New England Patriots being 2-8 this far into the season, so knowing what you know now, you might say, well, 6-3 is good, but they could have beaten the Chiefs. They could have beaten the Eagles. I will throw the Bills game out of the way because they just absolutely got crushed in that one. But you'd still take the 6-3. You would. And, you're entering week 11 with a game and a half lead in the division, and the way the games are coming down the stretch, at least the next couple of weeks, I'm not going to say it without saying it, but the Dolphins could have this division wrapped up a lot earlier than people expected. Just the fact that they're minus 450 right now at the books to win the division is not something we would have ever thought we'd see. And that's a combination of the Jets not having Aaron Rodgers and not being as good as we thought they'd be, and the Bills just being absolutely horrific, as you saw on Monday night. So I think you do reset the expectations. And if you had said in August 6-3 and in contention to win the division, you sign up for it. Now you're like, if you don't win the division, it's a huge disappointment because of what they have right now, the schedule they have the next couple of weeks, how bad the Bills and Jets have looked, and an opportunity to not only win the division, but as you guys talked about last week, getting a number 2 or 3 seed and potentially number 1 if something should happen to the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think number 2 seed now is of the utmost importance for this team. We've seen their splits home and away. They look like a completely different offense when they leave Hard Rock Stadium than we do at home. They could use as many home games. Obviously, it sounds silly. Of course, it's reductive. Yeah, you want to have home field advantage. But I think for the Dolphins, it means more than anyone. That really is a hard place for opposing teams to win for many reasons. And I think they can do it because I think the Jaguars, and we can get into this in a second, may have a softer schedule than the Dolphins. It's no lock they win the division at this point. Like the Houston Texans are coming on strong, so they could have their hands full in the South. The North is just going to be, bumper cars until week 18. I mean, it's just going to be people bouncing off each other until we have a winner. And the West, they should crown the Chiefs now. They probably should have crowned them in week 1.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We talked a lot about the schedule last pod. Certainly, but we should get into it. All of a sudden, the South, right? We saw Jacksonville schedule this 27th most difficult, I think, remaining. But they do have a game against the Texans as well. They have the Browns. They have the Bengals. There's losses there on their schedule. For Miami now, where do they? Let's play a game. How many losses can they afford and still get the number 2 seed? If you had to decide right now, is it 4? Can they get the 2 seed at 5 losses?
Well, I think you also have to look at the Ravens schedule, which, as Adam mentioned, the bumper cars that you're going to see in that division. The Ravens schedule is no joke. They have a very tough schedule, even like this Thursday night hosting the Bengals at home.
Yep.
I would think with their 6-3, you would probably can afford.
They have the Niners, Jaguars, Dolphins, Steelers, Bengals, Chargers among the remaining games.
Yeah, and they are 7-3, so they're half game clear as the 2 seed.
And ultimately, it's going to come down to which game you lose. If the Dolphins lose to the Ravens, it's not going to matter. If they beat the Ravens, I think you can afford 2 losses and still get the 2 seed. But looking at the schedule, there may not be 2 losses out there if you give them the win against the Ravens, which is by no means guaranteed. They literally can't win there except for last year. And the big comeback, that's a tough place to win. And listen, I'm not sold on the Ravens team. I haven't been all year. I did push them up to number 1 in my rankings when I finally got sold on them after their blowouts of Seattle and Detroit. And then, of course, they went and, pooped down their leg versus the Browns. But again, they also had a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter of that game. So they're a good football team. In order for the Dolphins to get the 2 seed, they got to do what they should do and beat the Ravens. And if they do that, they get the 2 seed. I don't see Jacksonville keeping it up, especially since I think Houston might win that division. And if the Dolphins beat the Ravens, they're going to knock them down a peg. So it's there for the taking. Of course, you got to go into Baltimore and win. You lose that, you're looking at the 3 or 4 seed because they should, in theory, win the division with what the Bills have left, with the Jets not having Rodgers and looking terrible, and the Dolphins' schedule significantly easier than both of them.
Yeah, I think at all costs they have to avoid the 4 seed because in the 4 seed, your first round playoff game is no sure thing, right? Would presumably get what the Bengals or the Browns, right?
Yeah, but the AFC
it'll probably be second place. Yeah, second place in the NFC North.
And then your gift for winning that is to go to Kansas City right off the bat. Yep. So
right, yeah. So 4 seed is a nearly impossible road. I think the 3 seed is probably where they're going to land. Is my guess is where they end up. And to get that, they got to go maybe 11-6, definitely 12-5. I think 11-6 might get it done. Particularly because I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Jaguars.
Yeah, and it's funny you say 11-6, and their team total right now live is 11.5, and that is what you can bet over or under 11.5. The juice is favoring the under, which would put you right at the 11-6 that Adam mentioned. You have 5 games against teams with a losing record coming up, and then you have the gauntlet with Buffalo, Dallas, and Baltimore. Depending on if you win all 5, which we can get into, you would need to win one of those other 3. If you drop one against the Jets or Tennessee or Washington or the Raiders, then you got to win 2 out of the final 3 to get to that 12th win.
Is that even that much of a gauntlet at this point? I mean, those last 3 games, is that really? I think that they're past the hard part of their schedule, and which is crazy to say because they've played 2 winning teams. Right? That's at this point they played 2 teams with winning records, and then they've had their trip to Buffalo and their trip to LA. I think the hardest part of their schedule is behind them.
I guess it depends on how you look at it. They don't do well in Baltimore, and they never play well against Buffalo. And the other game is the Dallas Cowboys, who are a good team. But for the Dolphins,
they did beat the Bills the last time it was in Miami, and that was a much better Bills team and a much worse Dolphins team, I would argue. So.
And they should beat the Bills at home.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, we'll see which of those teams shows up. That's another team. Their home versus road splits aren't fantastic. So let's see how they would do when they come on the road. Let's just take a second, guys, and pour one out for the Buffalo Bills because RIP, right? Their season's over.
RIP. It's over. I wrote about it last week in a betting article that you should bet the no at plus 105. The no today is minus 215. So tremendous value last week. After Monday night's game, I mean, you look at that schedule. They got the Chiefs, they got the Eagles, they got the Dolphins, they got the Cowboys. They're 5-5, and by the way, they look horrible. So pour a lot out for them.
Question for the group: Sean McDermott, good coach or not?
Not likable coach, frankly, as a Dolphins fan. Yeah, I will say that. This answer would have been very different a year ago, right? I think, are we seeing, he was supposedly meddling a bit in the offense, right? Reportedly. The defense has taken a step back. They've also are injured. Let's not lose sight of that. The injuries aren't an excuse, but if the shoe was in the other foot and it was the Dolphins, we'd be talking about, we're without our top 2 corners and our star middle linebacker. So that certainly impacts things. But I think that the view of him is not what it was, a year ago.
You cannot lose the game that they lost last night, and you definitely cannot lose it in the fashion in which you lost it, right?
Well, Sean Payton tried to give it to him. He totally tried his hardest.
Let's not lose track of the fact that they also lost an opener to the Jets with Zach Wilson playing all but 4 plays. So there's a lot of disappointing losses on that Bills schedule, and you see it a lot more in college than you do the NFL, that when you start losing coordinator after coordinator, things start changing. Alabama and the NFL has been able, and in college football has been able to roll with just constantly changing coordinators. Other teams have not, but you lose Leslie Frazier, you lose Brian Daboll, and all of a sudden it's like, this is McDermott's team now. And what you're seeing is what you're getting at 5-5 with some pretty crappy losses there. And by the way, they could be worse too. If you get a, pass interference call in the end zone, you lose to the Giants, like the Giants, who can't beat anybody.
Right. Yeah, no. And I think to me, what's most damning about Sean McDermott is the playoff coming up short. History is well documented, and allowing the Chiefs to go 70 yards in 13 seconds and all that. We've been, that's ground what we've covered. But they didn't even know how many players to have on the field for field goal block last night, right? I mean, that is the most basic counting your dudes in the most critical moment of the game to make sure you don't have too many guys in the field. And if you can't pass that test, how are you going to beat Andy Reid, right? How are you going to win the big games you have? I think it's pretty, and I'm not even like Homer hat on, whatever, you can call it what you want. I don't think it's close that Mike McDaniel is the best coach in the division. I don't even think it's close at this point. If you had put Mike McDaniel on that Bills roster that they had during those 3 years where they were just a juggernaut, and had him controlling Josh Allen in a way that, certainly Ken Dorsey's not able to do, I think Mike McDaniel would have a ring by now. I think they'd be Super Bowl champs at this point.
You also have a potential greatest of all time coach in that division too. I know they're 2-8, but the guy does have 6 rings.
We going to go down this road?
No, I'd love to say it's Brady over Belichick, Belichick over Brady argument, but I mean, I would take McDaniel over McDermott, and I would take McDaniel over Saleh. And I love Mike. It's year 2. Not sure I would take him over Belichick just yet. But
I'm talking about 2023 Bill Belichick, not 2009 Bill Belichick. All right. I think there's
yes.
Dude's lost his fastball, and dude does not know how to evaluate personnel. So he's a bad coach at this point because he's a bad GM.
Well, that's it. You got to disentangle the two. Belichick, the coach, still might have it, but Belichick, the evaluator, I mean, his last couple of drafts are among the worst, in at least their franchise history. I mean, they're bad. That 2022 one is bad.
But I mean, well, here's the question. So say the Commanders, and we're so far off base here, but whatever, it's a bye week. We were say the Commanders trade for Bill Belichick. Does he instantly make them 2 or 3 wins better?
No. Not with what they have. No. I mean, Brady comes there, then yes.
57-year-old Tom Brady.
Right. I mean, Ron Rivera is not a bad coach. So, Ron Rivera has gotten as much as he can out of this Washington team. And, I mean, I think Belichick is better, but, yeah, Belichick's lying in the bed he made. They chased Brady out, and he has the roster that he has that he made. So, it is what it is. I think the better question is, because you heard the stupid rumor go out the other day, if Belichick was in Dallas, is that Dallas team a Super Bowl team? A Dallas team that can't get it done with McCarthy.
Who's his OC? That's the question.
Right. And by the way, we talk about Dallas. The Dolphins have the narrative of not beating good teams. Look at Dallas. Dallas hasn't beaten any. The Dolphins have better wins than Dallas have, but it's the Dolphins narrative. So.
Well, that's why one of the talking heads called the Dolphins the AFC Cowboys. I forget who it was. One of the national networks.
Oh, it was Kyle Brandt, who had a great night last night on national television.
Right.
He clearly thought the game was awesome, right? you could clearly see that. It was all over his face.
Genuinely believe that game was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's talk. I know, David, you mentioned about the 11.5 wins for the Dolphins, right? To try to bring this back to the Dolphins. We got a little off track there, but we're looking at some of the other bets that are open. You know, that you can place right now on the Dolphins for the second half of the season. Certainly Super Bowl, right? They're 10-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're plus 450 to win the AFC. There's also some, player MVP, offensive player of the year props. Of all these bets you can make right now, David, if you were placing one right now today, which one would be, your favorite to either most likely to cash or the best value at this moment that you would wager on?
I think if you look at the ones that are posted right now, you mentioned Super Bowl 10-1, AFC 4.5-1, AFC East, you'd have to lay the 4.5. So that's, even though statistically speaking, with 82% implied probability, it is actually a good bet. I'm still not laying 450 on anything. 11.5 wins, you're getting plus money to the over. We just talked about their schedule. I like it. But I think your best bang for your buck is Tua is still 6-1 to win the MVP. And really, the guy's leading in still tons of categories. And I think his odds have dropped for a couple of factors. One, he lost to Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts jumped him in the MVP race. But the Eagles have a tough schedule coming up. And then you have the lack of a marquee win is what the narrative has been. But if they do figure that out and beat a Dallas and beat Buffalo and win the division and grab a 2 seed, 6-1 is not bad value. I know you and I got it at 11 before the season, but Tua was down to plus 350 at one point when the Dolphins, before they lost to the Eagles. You lost to the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. You lost to Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. If the Dolphins steal the 1 seed somehow, we're far from that, then plus 600 is a good bet. If it comes down to Tua versus Mahomes and Kansas City gets the 1 seed and the Dolphins get the 2 seed, I still think you can lean Tua because of the stats and the fact that the head-to-head matchup was not because Patrick Mahomes had a great game. Like, the Dolphins gave that away. It wasn't Mahomes who won it. And he has not had a good season. Plus, he's won a couple before, and we've seen the voters have voter fatigue in general. So I think the 6-1 is to me a value play because anybody can go take Tyreek Hill at plus 125 to win Offensive Player of the Year. Thankfully, I got it at 9-1 before the season. But plus 125, you're not getting any value, especially with A.J. Brown doing what he's doing. Justin Jefferson's not going to win it, but you also have C.D. Lamb out there. But those are the contenders for Offensive Player of the Year. And, everything else, like McDaniel plus 650 for Coach of the Year, I think Dan Campbell has that one wrapped up. And if Dan Campbell and the Lions don't win the division, it's because the Vikings went from 1-4 to the division, and all of a sudden Kevin O'Connell's going to win it. Or DeMeco Ryans, who has the freaking Texans in the playoffs right now, should win it. So McDaniel's behind all 3 of them, and so that's kind of a stretch. But out of all of those, I mean, the longest one is 33-1 for Achane to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. But again, he's missed too much time, and pretty sure the quarterback in Houston has that one wrapped up. So I would go, of all of those, I would either play Tua at 6-1 or take the plus money on them getting 12 wins and hitting that 11.5 now before they go ahead and beat the Raiders and that number gets up a little bit.
Do you think that Tua needs to be above the replacement level MVP candidate statistically because of the doubts that he has? Do you think that he's got to overcome more of a perception that he's a system quarterback, that he's not that good, he's a product of the talent around him and his coaching, and so he needs to be that much better Mahomes statistically to win the award?
I do think so, because at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes has won a couple of Super Bowls. He's proven he's done it. Tua did do well last year, but then there was an injury case. This year he stayed healthy, knock on wood, but has proven his numbers, but he's lost every big game he's played so far. So I think he does. I don't think Tua wins an MVP at 11-6 with losses to the Cowboys, Ravens, Eagles, and Chiefs. I just don't think you win that. I think if you run the table, especially beating a Dallas or a Baltimore, and you beat Baltimore, you might knock Lamar Jackson down a peg. Maybe they don't win the division. All of a sudden, Lamar's out of the case. If it comes down to Tua versus Mahomes, I think at that point, you look at the stats and you say, all right, Mahomes has the 1 seed and won the head-to-head matchup, even though it wasn't because of him. But Tua's stats are far superior, and you give him the award. And right now, you're getting double the value because Mahomes is at plus 325 right now, and Tua is at 600. Do I think Mahomes gets it over Tua? Yeah, it's the reason he's 325. I actually think Jalen Hurts wins the award. But Tua at plus 600 is a good value at this point.
So is Dallas or Baltimore, they're a marquee win? I mean, Baltimore probably. Is Dallas at home Christmas Eve? Would that be the marquee win that you mentioned that he would, potentially need?
I mean, if Dallas finishes with 11 or 12 wins and is the only reason they're not a division champ is because you got a 15, 16 win Eagles team, I think, yeah. Because right now, for better or worse, we kept hearing it, they have not beaten a team with a winning record. Neither is Dallas. But, Tua's going to need something like that on his resume. You're not going to get MVP for going 11-0 against sub-500 teams. It's just not, people are going to see that. People are going to hear that. So I think he's going to need to beat Dallas and Baltimore to win that award.
And he'll have showcase opportunities because that Cowboys-Dolphins game, it's not going to get flexed unless Fox loses its mind because Fox probably has the veto power on that. It's their marquee 425 game on Christmas Eve. The entire country is going to get that game, right? It's going to be everywhere. Certainly Ravens-Dolphins might get flexed to Sunday night. And then Dolphins-Bills, who knows what that game is for? I mean, if their Bills are out of it and the Dolphins have locked into their seed, it's going to be a 1:00 on Sunday game. We're not going to, they're not going to have a chance to show the world what they could do. But if it's somehow it's for the division, or the Dolphins win, they're the 1 seed, and the Bills win, they're in the playoffs, they might flex that to Sunday Night Football. He shreds that bad Bills defense. Maybe that's the trump card.
He's also going to have Black Friday, a national TV game against one of the better defenses in football. So, should they beat the Jets? Yeah, he's not going to get points for beating the Jets. But if he throws for 350 yards and dismantles a really good Jets defense, a Jets defense that Mahomes didn't do well against, that Josh Allen.
Yeah, I believe Robert Saleh said that they've embarrassed every quarterback, right? Wasn't that a couple weeks ago? He had said that. So,
I mean, that on national TV is the only game of the day with everybody watching on Black Friday. Should he go out there and shred that Jets defense that, again, you got to put them up against each other. Mahomes did not do well against that Jets defense, and neither did Josh Allen. So if Tua can go and show up in those games and do well, then you got to put him right there up with the other quarterbacks in the MVP race.
Okay, and I have one other that we didn't touch on. You kind of glossed over it, but you did send it to us before the show, which was the comeback player of the year. Because Tua was plus 280, which I'm guessing is number 2 behind DeMar Hamlin.
It is number 2 behind DeMar Hamlin. I said
is Hamlin a lock?
The guy steps on the field, he's comeback player of the year.
Yeah.
I don't, as a voter, I don't know how you don't. I mean, they even mentioned on the broadcast last night, and he has played. He played on special teams earlier this year, and he played in the preseason. But, I mean, the guy died on the field, and then a year later made a tackle on Monday Night Football. I said in the preseason column, if the guy steps on the field, he wins the award. And he did that last night. Now, I think he was going to win it regardless. The odds did go from minus 1,000 down to about minus 200 prior to Monday night's game. But now that he stepped on the field and made a tackle, I mean, how do you not give it to him? Now, the comeback player of the year is always one of the more controversial awards. I mean, hell, Tom Brady had odds to win it the year that he unretired and didn't miss any time. And somehow he was comeback player of the year because he retired. But he didn't miss any time. So that award has a lot of speculation as to what it should be. But at the end of the day, the guy died on the field and played the next year. He gets my vote.
Guys, we got some breaking news while we are podcasting live here. According to Adam Schefter, the Bills have fired Ken Dorsey, offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. Joe Brady will be the interim. And question is, if this doesn't work out, is that it for McDermott too? Was he the next one out the door? If this, because it could be the desperation play that he's making to save his job.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised. You're talking about McDermott being fired. We've been talking about it all morning, all night. Last night, wrote a column on PFN. At some point, you're saving face, and the offense has been a problem. It's been an unmitigated disaster. Not sure it's Ken Dorsey's fault that Josh Allen seems to wear slippery gloves when he plays and can't control the ball at any point in time. It's not Ken Dorsey's fault that Josh Allen's throwing against his body, that Josh Allen's throwing into triple coverage. But at the end of the day, someone's going to take the fall, and it's not going to be Josh Allen. So it's not going to be Sean McDermott in the middle of the year. So see you, Ken Dorsey.
All right, so quite the fall from grace, though, right, for Ken Dorsey? He was a hot offensive coordinator that was on the head coaching, in all the articles about best candidates, a year ago, he was up there, and now here he is being replaced by Joe Brady in the interim, which he has quite a story as well. He used to be a hot coordinator as well before his fall from grace.
Note to self: don't take your first NFL job in Carolina.
When we were planning out this show, we were talking about maybe doing best case, worst case scenarios for the Dolphins the rest of the year. You guys still want to do that? We got about 10 minutes left.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Why
don't you start us off, Adam?
Whoa, well, putting me on the spot. I was hoping to talk to you and gather
brought it up.
thoughts.
It was your idea. Let's do it.
All right. Best case, worst case. Well, best case, I mean, you got to think this team has a chance to win the Super Bowl, right? It has the talent you need. There's not aside from maybe the Philadelphia Eagles, there's not a more talented team. The Niners, I guess you could make that argument as well. But I think with their front end talent and even their depth, I think they've flexed their muscles on the offensive line a bit depth wise. Look, they've got $15 million sitting on the bench, Emmanuel Ogbah. I mean, this is a deep, talented team that has overcome injuries and starting to get healthy. We've discussed at length that the AFC doesn't scare anybody. They went toe to toe, obviously with the Chiefs. The Bills are a much diminished team than the team that beat them, and everybody else is just losing. Right? The Jaguars lost, Ravens lost, Bengals lost. AFC doesn't scare me at all. And you get to the Super Bowl and you take your shot. They won't be favored if they would go and play against the Eagles or I think even the Niners. But I do like, the 1 game sample size, take your shot, get a couple of turnovers and see what you can do. So I'd say that's the best case. And I mean, I don't want to sound more, but the worst case is the only way this team misses the playoffs is if they don't get at least 15 games out of their quarterback, right? That if Tua Tagovailoa, who, knock on wood, has been incredibly healthy this year, and all the concerns that we had going into the season have, not all of them, but a lot of them have allayed. If it's a Mike White stretch second half of the season, I think even a team that's minus 450 to win a division could find themselves back in the pack. So, but I think you're going to see the streak of not having a home playoff game since 2008 snapped. What are they? 88% according to New York Times to win the division, 94% to make the playoffs. And I think, as we talked about, I think that their floor is the 3 seed and they have a real shot to get the 2.
Matt, you were me.
I think, David, you want to go?
No, go ahead. You started talking.
Okay, I was going to say, no, I think morbid injuries aside, I think the kind of the floor, the worst case for the Dolphins, it would be getting the 4 seed. Which can certainly happen if they just win the 5 games they're favored and lose. I don't know if they'll be favored or not against the Bills at home. They probably will be, but if they lose those last 3, right, stumble into the playoffs as a 4 seed and get knocked out by Bengals, Browns, Steelers, I guess they still, right now they are the 5 seed. They probably won't hold, but that's probably the worst case. And that would be a failure, even with the moved goalposts. For me, heading into the season, winning a playoff game. Now, they don't have to win a division. They can go on the road and win a playoff game was the bar for me this year, back, before the season started. So that would be a colossal disappointment if they stumble in as the 4 seed, get knocked out, and that's it. But I think that would be the floor because I think it is within the realm of possibility. The ceiling, Adam, I know you said Super Bowl. You mentioned last week, internally, it's Super Bowl or bust for them, right? As a fan, I've been hurt too much to think that that's the ceiling here. I think AFC title game is probably the ceiling. Going into Arrowhead would be a hard thing. If the Chiefs got bounced before, I think the situation is different. I think if the Dolphins have to go into Arrowhead, that's probably where their season ends in the AFC title game, which would be a successful season for me. And I'd be happy with it. And it's something to build on. We can have a discussion about what their window is, right? In the next couple of years, they have cap issues and all that. But for this year, getting to the AFC title game would be a success. And I think that's the ceiling in my eyes.
I mean, hard to disagree with either one of you. I do think, and I think Adam said this on the pod last week. I listened.
Thank you, David.
They have the talent to win the Super Bowl. They have the system. They have the talent. They have the coach to win the Super Bowl. Adam's correct. They will not be favored against San Francisco or Philadelphia. Make the argument that it could be a pick 'em against the Lions. Lions would have a very easy schedule and could wind up with the 1 seed in the NFC, but I don't see them going to the Super Bowl, but that would be an interesting matchup. You got to almost put the ceiling there. Now, I think there's a difference between best case scenario and successful season. I think Matt is right. They advance the AFC title game and win their first playoff game in 20 something years. It's a successful season getting that far. Like, can't really get mad if they lose in Arrowhead to a team that's been to, 3 of the last 6 Super Bowls. But I do think they have the potential that they could have beaten Kansas City once, and they can beat them. In terms of floor, listen, minus 450 is minus 450. I had this conversation with my cousin last night, that also big listener of the program. Like, should the Jets beat the Bills next week and then the Dolphins beat the Jets the week after, the Dolphins have a 3-game lead with 6 to play in this division, and it's all but over. They would own all the tiebreakers at that point. So short of the Bills running the table, the Dolphins losing a whole bunch and sweeping that tiebreaker, the Dolphins would win the division. But I've also sat at MetLife way too many times and seen the loss and made that embarrassing walk to my car, the walk of shame, that should it go the other way and the Bills beat the Jets and then the Jets beat the Dolphins, all of a sudden the division's up for grabs. With the way the AFC is and all of these 5-5 and 6-4 teams, there is an unfortunate path where they miss the playoffs. Because if they don't win the division, they may miss it entirely. And that's not only disappointment, that's truthfully unacceptable, especially when you have the schedule in front of them. So I'm going to set the floor at what Matt said at the 4 seed, because they have the schedule in front of them that they should be no worse than the 3 seed if they lose to the Ravens. Should something go wrong, like Adam said, and Tua gets hurt or somebody else gets hurt, then you still have that cushion right now. You have that 1.5 game cushion, and you have the 2 games in the Jets in front of you, but you lose those 2 games, and all of a sudden it's a completely different ball game. So I'll set the floor at the 4 seed. I'm pretty confident that I would bet the 450 to win the division. I'm not going to, because you don't lay 450 on anything. You're one bad hit away from losing money there. But statistically speaking, at an implied 82%, and Adam said that they're 88% in New York Times, they should win the division as long as they take care of business. So I will set that floor at the 4 seed, although I think anything lower than the 3rd seed with a loss to Baltimore on the road would be acceptable.
What's wild is
rematch. You get the rematch. If you get that 3 seed, you win that first round game against an AFC North team, and then you go to Baltimore and play them again, then the season comes down to that game. So,
what's wild to me is how we're just saying, oh yeah, the next 5 games are easy. I mean, how often do they sweep the Jets? Rarely. It doesn't happen a ton. And we'll see, late in the season if Rodgers comes back. To me, if somehow the Jets beat the Bills, the Jets become the bigger threat to the Dolphins than the Bills do, because that is a team that has a defense that travels. And if you get back Rodgers for 3 games, literally anyone is better than Zach Wilson. Like, I don't care if it's 70% Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be better than Zach Wilson. They're going to be an improved team. Then it gets a little dicey, because the Jets have all the tiebreakers over the Bills, obviously, and they would have a head-to-head win against the Dolphins, and would have to see it come down to division record and common opponents and all those other tiebreakers. But to me, that's the scenario. Like, I truly think the Bills are donezo. Like, their schedule is so hard down the stretch that even if they beat the Jets this week, like, you just have to think in your brain, what's their path to, is it 10-7? Like, can a team that's 5-5 win 5 of its last 7 with that schedule? I mean, to me, that's pretty ambitious. So I again, unless Tua gets hurt, which obviously, God forbid, we don't want to talk about that, but unless that happens, the Bills are not a concern to me. The Dolphins will win enough of their last 8 games to finish ahead of them. But I do still think the Jets could make things interesting, which is crazy to say, because they're absolutely terrible right now. They're a bad
just
team.
had those 2 games, and you have the home game in 2 weeks, and then you have the game in Miami, which could have come down to Aaron Rodgers being back. And as a Dolphins fan, you just hope that the Jets are far enough out of it that Rodgers says, give me 6 more months, which he should in theory. But with Buffalo 5-5, and I mean, Dallas, Kansas City, Philly at Miami, like, they realistically should lose all 4 of those games. That's 9 losses. Like, you're 8-9 at best. If you beat the Jets, and you have the Jets twice, and you also have the Patriots, like 8-9, you're not getting in. in the AFC. So yes, maybe the Bills can steal one or two of those. The one they would need to steal is at Miami and then win the division because of it is what they would need to do. That's their path. Their path isn't going to be the wild card. Their path is to stay alive, stay behind the Dolphins, win week 18 and win the tiebreaker. That's the only path I see for the Bills.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was going to say the Aaron Rodgers thing, right? If he does come back, he's obviously better than Zach Wilson. But he's also, I would imagine he'd be even less mobile than he was to start the season. And behind that offensive line, like Zach Wilson can at least move, right? Rodgers on his 4 snaps, I think, was hit twice, and regardless, and that was on an Achilles that wasn't torn yet. So, yeah, he's better at throwing, assuming he can get the pass off, and that's a whole nother conversation. Wilson at least provides a little escapability behind that bad offensive line, and the Dolphins have a pass rush that gets to the quarterback. So, I'm not sitting here worried that Rodgers would be back, and that's going to impact how I view that second Dolphins game, which would be in Miami.
I personally feel the Rodgers stuff ended Sunday night because there was all the rumors he thrown on the field, ready to go, be back in a couple of weeks, and then they went out and absolutely looked terrific. He didn't like the play calling. He had arguments on the field, and he watched the Jets lose a game they shouldn't have lost to the Raiders. Like, if I'm Aaron Rodgers watching that, like, when am I coming back to? Like, give me another offseason. Go improve the offensive line. Give me a realistic shot here because, like you said, is he going to come back? Is he going to get injured again? And maybe he's done. Like, coming back to try to get the 7 seed? I mean, no one's ever done what he's trying to do. I wouldn't, but I
that
think
might be the only reason he does it, is to try to do it because no one's done it. I mean, to his credit, if he can pull it off, great.
If you beat the Raiders and you're 5-4, and then you go and you can upset the Bills and the Dolphins, and all of a sudden you're 7-4, fine. But you lose to a bad Raiders team, and I mean, they're bad. Like, the Jets are not a good offensive football team. They're not. And I'm not confident that you don't know it because he got injured on the 4th play of the season. I don't think Aaron Rodgers leads this Jets team to the playoffs. I know he's better than Zach Wilson, but that's a bad offense, a really bad offense. Yes, Zach Wilson's not helping, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers take this team to 11 wins? I don't think so.
I think it would look like a completely different offense. I think that they would have – their defense gives them short fields, so the drives would be longer. Games would have a completely different dimension if there's just competent quarterback play. So we'll see. I still think you're right that offensive line's bad. They certainly were not the best team in the division. It's crazy, though. Infante, you and I talked about this 3 months ago, that one of the 3, the Dolphins, Bills, or Jets, it's just not going to work out. And now it's looking like 2 of those teams, right? Which is nuts because all the hype for this division, if the Patriots were at all competent, they would be right there for a playoff spot, right? Because they play the same schedule essentially the Dolphins do. There's a lot of winnable games. And the conference just sucks, guys. The conference is bad. The entire league sucks. Let's not kid ourselves. But beyond the Dolphins, the Chiefs, obviously, the Ravens, and the Bengals, I guess the Jags, do you have any faith in any of those teams? Any of them?
No, I'll ask you a question I got last night. Like, have you ever seen the quarterback situation as bad as it's been in the NFL this year? It's bad enough that Zach Wilson cannot lose his job no matter how hard he tries to. And you got guys that none of us have ever heard of suiting up and starting for NFL teams. Like, unless your name is Ian Cummings or Dalton Miller, you haven't heard of half these guys. Like, have you ever seen the NFL's quarterback situation as poor as it is right now?
Well, we're going to get a front row seat on Sunday, guys. We're going to see one of those complete no-names. Aiden O'Connell, is that his name?
Aiden O'Connell.
Where did he go to college?
I looked this up last week, and I can't even remember because I also looked up Clayton Tune, and I looked up Josh Dobbs. I'm getting them all mixed up in my head, so I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You're starting guys that you're like, we always talk about the first round of the draft and all these great quarterbacks. And every year we have 7 quarterbacks we're all in love with. And then you have Clayton Tune and Aiden O'Connell. Yeah, Will Levis is finally getting in there, but really? Who are these guys?
So we all like the Dolphins on Sunday. Is that what we're saying?
Wait, back it up. Antonio Pierce. They have the interim coach effect, right? We saw that with Dan Campbell in Miami initially. Is Antonio Pierce the new Dan Campbell, Adam Beasley, who asked that in our chat?
Well, okay. First of all, maybe I don't want to cast aspersions on Antonio Pierce. Given the right roster and the right situation, entirely possible he can put together with Campbell, which admittedly has taken 3 years for Dan to put this together in Detroit. Yes,
they've beaten the Giants and the Jets at home.
Fair. The point I was going to make is Dan Campbell, when he got his opportunity in Miami, they looked fantastic for 2 weeks, and then there was major regression, like immediate regression back to, oh, we have a crap team. Here's our crap roster. Here's our crap result. Game 3 is coming up. The idea of that Raiders team with Aiden O'Connell as their quarterback, winning 3 straight, including in Miami, where they won, I think, 16 of the last 18 games. Yeah, that ain't going to happen.
Hey, fascinating that they're 2-0 and they're lighting cigars and they're dancing all over McDaniel's grave. And it's a great Vegas story that you can only be a Vegas fan to love. They've beaten the Giants and the Jets. Let's slow our roll with Antonio Pierce here. Like, they barely beat a bad Jets team, and they needed Zach Wilson to basically hand it to them. And they shut down a Giants team that my 4th grade team could stop as well. So you go into Miami and beat the Dolphins and then come home and beat the Chiefs, and you can give Pierce Coach of the Year honors just for doing that. But you beat the Jets and the Giants, who arguably are 2 of the worst 3 offenses in football right now.
Okay, so we all like the Raiders. I mean, we all like the Dolphins. Do we like them to cover? It's 11, I think. Has it gone to 11.5 yet, or is it still sitting at 11? I believe it's 11.
I mean,
would you?
You know what the Dolphins haven't done in a minute? Absolutely just click. Their offense has not been superstar offense in a minute. They're going to get Devon Achane back most likely this week. They've had 2 weeks of rest. McDaniel's had 2 weeks to stew over that Chiefs loss. I think they absolutely, wait for it, guys, boat race the Las Vegas Raiders. Boat race.
Beasley bingo. I got my card. I got it. Beasley bingo. Boat race and causation correlation. Winner, winner.
All I got. That's all I got.
I mean, they beat the Broncos by 50. It's still amazing to say that. The Giants by 15, the Panthers by 21, and the Patriots by 14. All 4 of those teams, except for I'd say half of those teams are better than the whatever city the Vegas Raiders play in. So I would lay the number, yeah, especially since what Adam just said, they're getting people back, they're healthy, and they're off a bye week. And yeah, they struggle to put up points against Kansas City, who hasn't? They struggle to put points up against the Eagles, who hasn't? They still put 31 up a few weeks ago against the Patriots and 42 against the Panthers after giving them a 14-0 lead. So they have proven, if you want to lay into the narrative, that they boat race bad football teams. So I would lay the number. I absolutely would.
Yeah, I mentioned this before the show. They're 5-0 against the spread. You know, as a favorite, their average margin of victory above the spread is 13 points. So they cover by almost 2 touchdowns. I suspect this wouldn't be any different.
And I don't lay double digits in the NFL. I don't, as a rule. But if I were, I would. If you said gun to the head, which side would you take? I would take 2 in the Dolphins over whoever the quarterback in Vegas is.
Poor Aiden O'Connell.
Right.
He doesn't get any respect here in this podcast. Okay. Well, that is it. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, available on all podcast platforms. Rate and review would help too. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Like this episode as well. That helps us. Be sure to visit profootballnetwork.com/Miami-Dolphins for all of our Dolphins coverage from one Adam H. Beasley. David, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you. We will have you back at some point this year as the Dolphins can continue their run to at least a division title, right?
You would hope so.
At the bare minimum. And who knows from there?
I think the other best case scenario is that Adam H. Beasley gets on Hard Knocks a whole bunch of times with his PFN gear. I think that also is helpful. Other side.
We will look. It's going to be like playing Where's Waldo. When those episodes start next Tuesday on HBO Max or HBO or Max, whatever it's called, 9 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday starting next week, we will look for Adam. Try to find your way in front of the cameras when you're there, please. Okay.
Oh, I've already ingratiated myself. Ingratiated myself to the crew, so yeah, they will have my best side.
Excellent. All right.
I'll try to keep up my my points per game average on this pod. So Try to keep it up.
It could happen, as Adam said. It could happen this week.
Again, they're not scoring 70, so take the under.
Wait, what is the total? Do you know off the top of your head?
I meant the Dolphins scoring 70.
Yes, I know. But do you know what the game total is?
I believe it was 44 and a half, but stand by.
That can't be right. They're going to score 45 on their own.
I was about to say, is that the team total? Because that's what that sounds like.
I can look it up for you.
Nah, don't even bother.
No, look it up. It's coming.
Okay. If you stuck with us this long, stick with us 30 more seconds here.
46 and a half. I was off by
46 and a half.
46 and a half, yes.
And that's just saying they don't think, okay, I think that quarterback is going to struggle big time against this Dolphins defense. So maybe they're thinking it's going to be like 45-3 or something,
Right now, the Dolphins team total is 29 and a half. And the Raiders team total, would do the math, is 16 and a half. So 29 and a half to 16 and a half.
Hammer that under, man. I would absolutely hammer that under.
I would also hammer the over Dolphins team total as well. So,
okay. Well, be sure to check back next week so you can all celebrate in the victories that Adam and David just gave out here.
Though the last time I took an over 29 and a half with the Dolphins, I brought my, at the time, 8-year-old to the game against the Texans last year, and the Dolphins were up 29-0 at halftime. And I told my kid what to root for. 29 and a half, and I'll buy you whatever you want. At 29-0 at halftime, my 8-year-old thought betting was the easiest thing on the planet. The Dolphins did not score another point the rest of the game. So it was as bad of a beat as I've ever had, and I had it in person with my son. So be careful.
It's good to see you passing down betting to your children.
All about the education.
All right, great. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with us here for 45 minutes of this. And we will see you back here next week on the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast.